Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Buckers. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference on how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So, welcome to Hot Takes. It's been a minute since we have done Hot Takes because the postseason obviously, but now I'm desperate for content, which is exactly why this series exists in the first place. Also, I do want to say real quick, the next videos you're going to see for the coming week are recorded recorded before I went on vacation. How would they be recorded after? That doesn't make any damn sense. So the reason I'm wearing the same Pink Floyd shirt in every single video is I sat here and recorded like 8 videos in a row. So yeah, with that said, let's get into these hot takes. The Knicks are in the finals if Julius Randle plays like an all-star and our bench was productive. Well, here's the thing about that. This entire take is, if a thing happened that didn't happen, a different thing would happen. Sure. I mean, you can make that argument if you want, but like New York's bench not being particularly productive, other than like Emmanuel Quickley, that's not necessarily the biggest surprise in the world. And Julius Randle playing poorly in the postseason, not the biggest surprise in the world. So I think this is a dumb take, and I think I have another take like this later in the video, or either that or the other hot takes video, where it's just like, yeah, if these extreme specific set of circumstances happen, some different result would occur. Now, first of all, I think even if Julius Randle played like an all-star and Emmanuel Quickley averaged 20 points off of the bench, the Knicks were not going to beat the Denver Nuggets in the finals if they made it there. But regardless of that, also, I don't think if Julius Randle played at his regular season form and like Emmanuel Quickley averaged even 20 points a game off of the bench for the postseason, they would make the finals. But even with that, the postseason is when teams are supposed to prove who they are. And if they don't show up, that's who they prove to be. It's not like it was an outlier in this case. It's not like just miraculous. If you don't show up in the postseason, you don't show up in the postseason. And you as a fan don't get to say, well, if our all-star player played like an all-star, he didn't though. That's not a take. It's just fantasy. Nikola Jokic was the 3rd best defender throughout the finals. I mean, he was definitely not a better defender than Bam, but I think you could argue he was the best defender on his team, as good as Aaron Gordon is defensively and often in a more aesthetically obvious way. Nikola Jokic was kind of an excellent defender throughout this entire postseason and kind of anchored that defense. Obviously, it was a lot more than him, but I frankly think he was the 2nd best defender in these entire finals. Maybe not in general, but in terms of overall defense played in this series, I would give it to him. The Nuggets are not that good. Jokic's playmaking makes his teammates look good. I hate this. I hate that logic 9 times out of 10, usually more than that. It's the same thing as like people saying Tim Duncan didn't deserve his success because Greg Popovich, or even vice versa of that. The players can only do what they can in the environment they're in. Nikola Jokic didn't make KCP an amazing 3-point shooter, an amazing catch and shoot guy. He didn't make Aaron Gordon a great backdoor cut option. He didn't make Jamal Murray an amazing shot creator and someone who can be a great catch and shoot option. Didn't make Michael Porter Jr. an excellent 3-point shooter. All of those things were true of those players before they ended up in Denver. Does Nikola Jokic make them a little bit better than they otherwise would be? Sure, you can say that of almost any superstar ever, but like for the role players on this team, that's kind of how it works. Like, yeah, role players in environments that are not built for role players to succeed play worse, and role players in environments where they are set up to succeed play better. Shocking. It's not really a knock on them. It's just when you're not a superstar player, you need the circumstances to be in your favor to perform better. And that does not take anything away from KCP, from Michael Porter Jr., from Aaron Gordon, or from Jamal Murray, or from Bruce Brown, or from Christian Brown, or from Jeff Green. It's pretty much the only guys that were in that rotation. So yeah, no, that argument is silly. I think there are extreme examples where you can argue this is the case. Like, for example, I don't think DeAndre Jordan's making an All-NBA first team without CP3 on his team. But generally speaking, great players or good players are good in good environments and not as good in bad environments. It's just duh. I think there's way too many overreactions to playoff losses. Like, you don't make the finals so instantly you've hit a ceiling and you need to blow everything up. Some teams obviously should, but like, do the Celtics and Bucks really need to shred the whole roster? Well, to answer your question at the end with those two teams. I think for Milwaukee, the more concern there is just the age of this roster. Like Chris, Drew, and Brooke are all, I think, closer to their mid-30s than they are 30, if not they're on their way there. And Drew Holiday obviously sucking for yet another postseason. This would make three in a row. Basically, any time for Milwaukee scoring the ball wise, Drew Holiday was a disaster. He would still be a pretty good playmaker and defender, of course, an excellent defender especially. But, you know, there's reasons to think, hey, we should move on from this guy. But I was never advocating that Milwaukee should blow it up, but perhaps a Drew Holiday swap for someone else is worthy of exploring. In the case of the Boston Celtics, obviously I don't think they should blow it up, but I do think Jalen and Jason needs to be done. Not only for the fact of the Supermax contract that's coming up, but the fact that they are redundant as a duo. I made a main channel video that no one watched, which was a shame because it was one of my favorite videos I made in a long time, but it was about how synergy is so important between duos, and Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic have that synergy. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum do not. They essentially do the same things, except Jaylen Brown does them 20% worse, unless it's ball handling and playmaking, in which case he does it 100% worse. But otherwise, you know, shot creating wings on the perimeter who do not make each other better players. So in that case for Boston, blow it up. In general, do some people hit the panic button, say just quit this and blow it all up a little too early sometimes? Absolutely. I think that's also just because us as NBA fans are super hyper into trades. I think the social media age has made that only more popular. Obviously, it's become a more common thing as the NBA has progressed. So I think it's partially that, just because people want the drama, people want the exciting new thing. But sometimes people need to chill out. I agree with that. At the same time, the Celtics should trade Jaylen Brown for sure. The Heat were the 8th seed because they underperformed during the regular season. They had some impressive wins against better teams than them, but they weren't the greatest Cinderella story ever. They should have earned the 4 or 5 seed, but didn't. Here's the problem with that, Seth. You can make that argument for any low seed that makes a playoff run. Like in the case of like the 1999 Knicks, you could definitely make a case that they should have been better in the regular season, but due to the lockout and a couple of other circumstances, you know, they just didn't go as far into the seeding as they should have. Obviously, Miami was a better team than the 8th seed, but yeah, that's why it's a Cinderella story. Sure, maybe you just say they are getting credit for having failed in the regular season, which maybe there's a degree of truth to that, but I feel like you can use this argument for literally any single impressive quote-unquote postseason run relative to what was expected of them. You can just say, well, they should have performed better so that it was expected of them. But no, that's just not how it works. That's not how narratives work. The idea of a Cinderella story ultimately is a narrative, however true it may be. It's a spin on just the reality that we're seeing. And if you're going to do that, it only makes sense to call a freaking 8th seed making the NBA Finals a Cinderella story, regardless of how they were the 8th seed. Unless, like, they had just, you know, all of their star players missed like 30, 40, 50% of the season, in which case maybe I could see your argument. But yeah, well, Miami did have some health issues. Ultimately, they underperformed in the regular season and then proved that they were indeed a contender after all. So that sounds like a Cinderella story to me. Clay and Poole shoot their normal percentage and the Warriors win the chip, or at the very least, they would push the Nuggets to 7. They would not win the championship. I don't think Clay and Poole hitting their shots beats Denver. But again, same point I made about the first take. If something different happened, then something different would happen. Okay, whatever you say, man. Jalen Brunson is the best point guard in the East. After reading this take, I made sure I scrolled through the Eastern Conference and all those teams just to be sure that there was not a point guard that was obviously better. I would still put Trae Young over him. And I think that's it. Drew Holiday, if he didn't have such a stinker of a postseason, same goes for James Harden. Sure, I'd make that argument that they're better than Jalen Brunson, but given how great he was, given how terrible those guys were in the postseason, Trae Young's basically the only guy who I would say is better. And frankly, it's probably pretty close. I don't know. I think a lot of people underrate Trae Young at this point, but Jalen Brunson, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I don't agree, but I don't hate it. But yeah, that's it. That's Hot Takes. Goodbye.